I left town for 9 weeks, just 9, to help my brother settle into his new place up in Kentucky. Nothing dramatic, no big life event, just family stuff, boxes, bad pizza, and a lot of back and forth driving. And when I came back, I found a lake. Not a puddle, not a ditch, a full-blown, 2-acre pond, sitting right in the middle of my land like it had always been there. Except it hadn't, and the craziest part? My neighbor built it. While I was gone, like I wouldn't notice. Like 520 acres means you can just hide things. Yeah, that's not how land works. Not in Georgia, not anywhere. Now, I'm not some absentee landowner who forgets what he owns. This property's been in my family since 1961. My grandfather bought it when it was nothing but timber and stubborn red clay, and every inch of that boundary was marked the old-school way: iron rods, hand-stacked stone fence, lines that have outlasted marriages, businesses, and most people's attention spans. So when I say I know where my land starts and ends, I mean I know. My place sits just outside a small town near Rome, Georgia, quiet, mostly woods and pasture, the kind of place where you hear coyotes at night and tractors in the morning. And about 6 months before all this, a couple moved in next door. Chad and Melissa Parker. Atlanta people. You can always tell, not in a bad way, just different energy, cleaner boots, newer trucks, that kind of thing. First time I met Chad, I was clearing brush near the southern fence line, sweat in my eyes, chainsaw humming, and he rolls up in one of those side-by-sides like he's in a commercial. Hops out, big smile, handshake. Hey man, we just bought the place next door. Friendly, confident, a little too polished. I told him straight up, good to meet you. Boundary runs right along this old stone fence. Been that way longer than either of us has been alive. He nodded like he heard me, but not like he listened. And that's the thing about some people. They don't argue with you. Not at first, they just file it away, and later, they decide you're wrong. So yeah, fast forward 9 weeks. I'm back, tired, sunburned, just wanting to check on things, make sure nothing's fallen apart. I take the back trail, crest this little rise overlooking the lower pasture, and I just stop. Engine running, brain not, because down there, where there used to be grass and a natural spring, there's water, a lot of it, smooth, reflective, man-made edges, freshly cut banks, clay packed tight like someone knew exactly what they were doing, and I just sit there thinking, no way someone did this. But they did. I drove down, got out, walked the edge. You could still smell the dirt, fresh excavation, maybe a couple weeks old, water already filling in from my spring, and that's when it hit me. This wasn't a mistake you fix with a phone call. This was a decision, a very expensive, very deliberate decision made on land that didn't belong to them. So I called Chad, put it on speaker, didn't even wait to calm down. He picks up all casual, like we're talking about weather. Hey man, what's up? And I said, you built a pond on my property. You're gonna need to fill it back in immediately. No yelling, no threats, just facts. There's this pause, short, but telling. And then he goes, oh, that pond? That's ours. We had a contractor come out. He verified the property line before digging. Like that settles it, like saying it makes it true. And I just laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was so confidently wrong. No, I said, your contractor verified something, just not the truth. That pond is about 40 yards onto my side of the fence, and now his tone shifts, just a little edge creeping in. Well, we paid over 30 grand for that project. Our guy does this all over the county. Maybe your fence isn't where you think it is. And there it was, that quiet little accusation, like maybe I didn't understand my own land, like history didn't matter if you hired the right guy. Now here's the thing. People don't like being wrong, especially when it costs money. And Chad? He didn't just build a pond. He built a version of reality where he couldn't be wrong, because the alternative meant admitting he'd just dumped $30,000 into someone else's backyard. I told him I'd be getting a survey done again, even though I already had one from 2015, and he just said, do what you gotta do, real dismissive, like he was already gearing up for a fight he thought he'd win. And that's when I realized this wasn't going to be neighborly, this wasn't going to be quick, and it definitely wasn't going to be cheap. Because when someone moves a boundary in their head, they don't just move dirt, they move logic, they move accountability, and they will stand there, on your land, looking you dead in the eye, and tell you it's theirs. Yeah, That's exactly what Chad did. All right, let me pause the story for a second, because this right here, this is where a lot of people get tripped up, and not just in rural land disputes. This happens everywhere, even in suburban neighborhoods with HOAs and neat little fences. According to standard procedure, before you touch anything that involves land alteration, digging, grading, building, you verify the boundary through a licensed survey, not a contractor's. Yeah, that looks about right. Those are two very different things. One holds up in court, the other gets you into court. From a legal perspective, what Chad did wasn't just a mistake. It crossed into what's called encroachment, and when you alter someone else's land, especially something permanent like a pond, you're looking at serious liability. We're talking restoration costs, damages, sometimes even punitive penalties if it looks intentional. And here's where it gets interesting. This is a psychological trap a lot of people fall into. Once someone invests money, big money, into a project, their brain starts protecting that decision at all costs. It's called sunk cost fallacy. Instead of stepping back and saying, hey, maybe we messed up, they double down, they defend, they escalate. Because admitting the mistake feels worse than continuing it. And in HOA neighborhoods? Same pattern. Someone builds a fence 6 inches too far, plants trees over the line, extends a driveway, and suddenly it's not about land anymore. It's about ego, control, who gets to be right. So yeah, what Chad was doing. Not new, not even rare, but still, incredibly expensive when reality finally catches up. Anyway, back to the story. So I called in someone I actually trusted, not a guy with a backhoe and a business card, but a licensed surveyor named Daniel Reeves, mid-50s, been working landlines longer than I've been paying property taxes, the kind of man who doesn't say much unless he's absolutely sure. And when he is, you can take it to the bank. He came out 2 days later, early morning, coffee in hand, old GPS unit slung over his shoulder, and we walked that stone fence line together, slow, methodical. He checked the iron rods, pulled the original county plats, cross-referenced everything with historical deeds going back decades. Not guesses, not opinions, data, layered over time. At one point he just stopped, looked out toward that brand new pond glistening in the sun, and let out this quiet breath, not surprise, more like disappointment. Yeah, he said, this isn't even close. And that's when I knew we weren't dealing with a gray area. This was black and white. He measured it out, 42 yards, fully inside my property, not touching the line, not straddling it, just planted there like it belonged. And Daniel documented everything, photos, coordinates, written report, the whole package, the kind of file that doesn't argue, it just wins. We sent Chad a formal notice that same week. Certified mail, signature required, clean, professional, no drama. It laid out the findings, included the survey data, and gave him a deadline, 21 days to restore the land to its original condition. Fair, more than fair, honestly, because fixing a mistake early is always cheaper than fixing it late. And for a minute, I thought maybe, just maybe, he'd take the off-ramp, cut his losses, blame the contractor, move on. Yeah, no. Instead, I get a letter, not from Chad, but from some law firm out of Buckhead, all polished language and carefully chosen words, basically saying their independent assessment supported the pond's location, which, translated into plain English, means we're going to pretend we're right until someone forces us to admit we're not. And while all this is going on, they didn't stop, not even a little. They leaned in. I drove out there one afternoon and saw a fountain installed in the middle of the pond, like something out of a resort brochure, water shooting up into the air, catching sunlight like it was proud of itself, a dock going in on the far side, treated wood, nice. Craftsmanship, and I'm standing there thinking, are they serious right now? So I called Chad again, and this time I didn't bother with patience. You got a legal notice, I said. You know that pond is on my land. Why are you still building? And he goes, calm as ever. My attorney advised me to continue the project unless a judge tells us to stop. Like that was some kind of shield, like common sense just didn't apply anymore. And that right there, that was the moment it stopped being about a mistake and became a strategy. Because what he was doing, whether he realized it or not, was trying to create something courts hate to undo, a finished improvement, something expensive, functional, established, the idea being, if it looks permanent enough, maybe the judge hesitates, Maybe they split the difference. Maybe he keeps it. But here's the problem with that plan. It only works when you're not completely, undeniably wrong. So Daniel filed a formal complaint with the county, land disturbance violation, unauthorized excavation, the works, and that got things moving, inspections, paperwork, timelines slow, but steady, like a train you can't hear coming before you see it. Weeks passed, 11, to be exact, and in that time, their little recreation pond turned into a full-blown backyard centerpiece, stocked with fish, landscaped edges, even a couple of chairs set up like they were hosting Sunday afternoons out there. I didn't touch it, didn't interfere, just documented everything, every addition, every change, because the more they built, the clearer the liability became. Then finally, court day, small county courtroom, nothing fancy, wood benches, fluorescent lights, that faint smell of old paper and coffee. Judge Eleanor Whitaker presiding, sharp eyes, no-nonsense demeanor, the kind of judge who's seen every excuse in the book and stopped believing them years ago. Chad showed up in a suit that probably cost more than my truck payment, attorney right beside him, folders stacked like they were about to rewrite reality. We presented first. Daniel walked through the survey, step by step, calm, precise, no emotion, just facts, maps, coordinates, historical markers, even photos of that same stone fence from decades ago, unchanged, consistent, undeniable. Then there's Side, their expert. And I'll give him this. He talked about modern measurement techniques, possible discrepancies, alternative interpretations, a lot of words, not a lot of weight. Because every time he reached for uncertainty, Daniel had documentation, and the judge saw it. She didn't drag it out, didn't entertain theatrics. After closing statements, she leaned forward, looked directly at Chad, and said, almost casually, "The boundary is clearly established." Just like that, no build-up, no suspense. Then she turned to me. "The pond is entirely on your property." And I swear, the room got quieter in that moment, like even the air understood what was coming next. Defendant is given 22 days to remove the pond and restore the land to its original condition. Failure to comply will authorize the plaintiff to carry out restoration at the defendant's expense. Simple, clean, final. Outside the courtroom, Chad didn't say much, just that tight smile people wear when things didn't go their way, but they're not ready to accept it yet. His attorney whispered something to him, probably about options, appeals, delays. But here's the thing about deadlines. They don't care how you feel. 22 days came and went. No trucks, no workers, no attempt to fix anything. That pond sat there like a monument to stubbornness. So on day 23, I made a call. Blackridge Earthworks, owner named Mike Callahan. Big guy, gravel voice, 30-plus years moving dirt across half the state. The kind of operator who doesn't ask questions once the paperwork's in order. He showed up at sunrise with 2 bulldozers, 3 dump trucks, and a crew that looked like they'd done this 100 times before. Daniel was there too, clipboard, camera, documenting every second, because when you do something like this, you do it right. I handed Mike the court order. He glanced at it, nodded once. All right, let's put it back. And just like that, the undoing began. The dozers pushed into those carefully sculpted banks, tearing through weeks of work like it was nothing, water displaced, mud shifting, the clean edges collapsing back into raw earth. The fountain went silent first, cut clean, like someone pulled the plug on the whole illusion. Truck after truck hauled and filled dirt, restoring grade, rebuilding the land the way it had been before any of this started. No shortcuts, no rush, just steady, deliberate work. It took 3 days, 72 hours, and that pond, Chad's investment, his statement, his version of reality, was gone. Not hidden, not repurposed, erased. Leveled back into pasture like it had never existed. Late afternoon on the 3rd day, as we were finishing final grading, smoothing everything out to match the natural contour, I saw a familiar side-by-side coming down the trail. Chad and Melissa. They pulled up, dust trailing behind them, and just sat there for a second, looking out at what used to be their pond, now just land again. I walked over, wiped my hands on my jeans, and handed him a copy of the court order, same one he'd already ignored. You had 22 days, I said, not angry, not loud, just stating the obvious. He took the paper, didn't look at it, just stared past me at the field, and for the first time since this whole thing started, he didn't have anything to say. No argument, no confidence, no version of reality to lean on. Just silence. So yeah, that's how it ended. Or at least, that's how that chapter ended. Because real life doesn't wrap up neatly just because the dirt's been pushed back into place. It lingers in paperwork, in bank accounts, in reputations. A few weeks after all that, Chad tried to sue me, said I destroyed shared improvements, which, I gotta admit, is a bold move when the improvement is sitting entirely on someone else's land. The judge didn't even entertain it, dismissed it fast, and then added the part that really stings. He had to cover my survey costs, plus damages for the timber and the spring he disrupted. Just under 10 grand on top of everything else he'd already burned. And about a year and a half later, they sold the property, quietly. No big listing hype, no lakefront view selling point anymore. Just another piece of land changing hands. Now here's the thing. People hear stories like this and they think it's about revenge, about getting even, about watching someone lose something they built. It's not. At least, not really. Because the truth is, none of this needed to happen. That pond didn't have to be dug in the wrong place. That money didn't have to be wasted. That relationship between neighbors didn't have to go nuclear. There were about a dozen points along the way where this could have stopped. Calmly, cheaply, respectfully, but it didn't. And the reason it didn't is the part most people don't like to talk about. Ego. The lesson here is, land disputes are almost never just about land. They're about identity, control, the quiet need to be right even when the evidence says otherwise. And once someone ties their pride to a decision, especially an expensive one, logic starts taking a back seat. From a legal perspective, this case was straightforward, clear boundary, documented history, professional survey, open and shut. But what made it drag on, what made it escalate, was the refusal to accept that clarity. And that's where a lot of people get into trouble, because they assume confidence equals correctness. It doesn't, and money definitely doesn't. According to standard procedure, if there's even a question about a boundary, you stop, you verify, you bring in the right people before you move a single shovel of dirt, because once you change the land, you're not just dealing with lines on a map anymore. You're dealing with consequences. And here's something a lot of folks don't realize, especially in HOA neighborhoods or suburban developments. The same principle applies, just on a smaller scale. Fences, driveways, retaining walls, even landscaping. You cross that invisible line, and suddenly you're not decorating. You're encroaching, and once it's built, removing it is always more painful than placing it correctly in the first place. This is a psychological trap, that moment where you think, well, I've already spent this much, might as well keep going. That's the exact moment you should stop, because doubling down doesn't fix the mistake, it just compounds it. And look, I get it, nobody likes being told they're wrong, especially not by a neighbor, especially not when there's money involved. But there's a difference between protecting your pride and protecting your future. Dee chose pride, and it cost him, not just financially, but in time, stress, reputation, and ultimately, the place he moved there for in the first place. Now me? I got my land back, exactly the way it was supposed to be, but I also got a front row seat to how quickly things can spiral when people stop listening and start defending. So if you take anything from this, let it be this. The lesson here is verify before you build, listen before you argue. And if you ever find yourself standing on someone else's land, trying to explain why it's yours, you're probably already in trouble. And I'm curious, because I know this kind of thing happens more than people admit. Have you ever dealt with a neighbor dispute like this? Maybe not a pond, but a fence, a tree, a few feet that turned into a full-blown conflict. Drop it in the comments. I read more of those than you'd think. And if you want more stories like this, the kind that sit right at the edge of everyday life, and how did this even happen? Stick around, there's always another one.